What do another 4 years of Donald Trump mean for you? He's promised to end global conflicts and fast. So do you see a path to peace, or does his unpredictability make you fear the opposite? Tonight we're in Hartlepool in County Durham, a seaport town with a proud shipbuilding and fishing past which has been dominated by Labour since the 70s. Our audience, though, as every week, reflects the electoral picture across the nation. Welcome to Question Time. Tonight's panel from the government is Sarah Jones. She is Industry Minister, working across the Departments of Energy Security, Net Zero and Business. She was elected MP for Croydon Central in 2017. Matt Vickers was appointed just yesterday as Shadow Home Office Minister by the new Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch. He's also Conservative MP for Stockton West, which is just about half an hour's drive from here. Tim Montgomerie is a right-leaning thinker, writer and commentator. In the past, he's worked for or advised Conservative leaders William Hague, Ian Duncan-Smith and Boris Johnson. Now he's a senior contributor to Times Radio and Talk TV. And Bonnie Greer is a British-American playwright and author. She's written more than a dozen plays, 2 novels, a short film, a musical history of her hometown Chicago, a memoir and an opera. In 2010, she was awarded an OBE for her contribution to the arts. Welcome to our panel, welcome to our audience here in Hartlepool, great to see you, and of course welcome to you at home. You can join in the conversation on social media. We're on iPlayer, we're on BBC Sounds, we're everywhere basically here at Question Time. And tonight we are in Hartlepool, and our first question comes from Stephen Bales.
What benefits could Donald Trump bring to the UK upon becoming President of the USA once again?
Right, well, unless you've been in outer space, you won't have missed the fact that there has been this election in the States. So your question, Stephen, is interesting. What benefits could Donald Trump bring to the UK? Obviously, I'm going to come to you, panel. Just out of interest, what benefits do you think he could bring?
Well, things like trade.
I mean, you talked about tariffs on trade, but
yes.
But you still think that would be a benefit?
I think so, yes. And things like ways to solve wars throughout the world, and mainly trade, though, at the moment.
Right, OK, interesting. Sarah, what benefits could he bring? That's how Stephen has phrased his question.
Yeah. Well, we already have a really interwoven relationship with America, and we have done for years and years and years, and the trade that you talk about is incredibly important for the UK. The trade between our two countries is about £300 billion a year. If you look at inward investment coming into the UK, we had a big investment summit a few weeks ago. There were some big American firms that are investing in the UK. Equally, some of our firms go and invest in America. So we have this very strong relationship when it comes to security, when it comes to intelligence sharing.
But none
we have
of that
a really
is
strong
specific to Trump.
Security.
I mean, that's
what
the
I
relation
would
with America.
hope,
what about Trump specifically?
Well, what I would hope is that we have a new president who won a very decisive victory. So he has a clear mandate for 4 years. We've just had a general election in the UK, and we won a clear mandate for 4 years. So these two governments need to work together. For the right of...
Can you not think of any benefits?
Yeah, I think this is what I'm saying. I'm saying I think if you look at what's happened, if you look at the relationships we have, then I hope we work with Donald Trump to build on those. I hope we have more trade.
And we're talking about
more
trade.
Security arrangements.
Okay.
If you look at the world at the moment, the point that you made, the dangers that we see around us, this is an insecure world. America is the most powerful country in the world. He is the most powerful president. We have to be working really closely to make sure we are delivering progress in the Middle East, for example. And that's what Keir Starmer in his conversation with Donald Trump spoke about yesterday. This is an opportunity to get some kind of change to the really awful situation we find in the Middle East is one example.
And you think he's the man to do that?
I think we'll have to see what he manages to achieve. Of course,
because he said to Netanyahu, the Israeli, the head of the Israeli government, just get it done.
Well, we will see what happens when he becomes president. My point is we are going to work really closely with America, and I hope that we can see our two countries working together for the benefit of everybody.
Matt, Stephen's very particular question is what benefits could Donald Trump bring?
I think exactly what Stephen was saying. So I think, you know what, our biggest trading partner, huge potential there. Before, under the last Trump administration, we were in there having the discussions about a free trade agreement. Subsequently, Biden went in. That was toast. But we've got memorandums of understanding in place.
And what about the tariffs then? Because Donald Trump has talked, was it tariff is his favourite word or something?
Well, that's why.
And he's talked about imposing 10 to 20% tariffs on all imports coming into the US. That would affect us, clearly. Are you worried about that?
We have a special relationship. When he was last in, he was looking at the free trade agreement.
So what does that mean, no tariffs?
So I'm telling you, the Labour government needs to pull up the chair, get around the table and have the discussion to try and deliver free trade and ensure those tariffs don't happen within our special relationship. I think the other thing that Trump brings, we could benefit from in the UK, is around defence. We know that he's as keen as we are to see NATO partners contributing more, putting more into defence. In an increasingly dangerous world, we need to spend more on defence.
And do you think he's committed to NATO?
I think he is committed to NATO. I think we're also seeing all of the players in that team need to put more money forward.
Not very warm words about NATO. And he said, if you're not paying your way, frankly, the Russians want to attack you, I'd let them.
NATO needs to be putting more money forwards. Each of those partners need to put more money forwards, play their part, do their bit, because we are in a very dangerous world, and the partnership only works if everybody puts in.
OK. Let's hear from this person in the front. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, so you talk about benefits. We need to remember who Donald Trump represents, this whole MAGA narrative. So,
well, he also represents about at least half the American population, over.
Won the election, fair and square, no issue there. But in his last term in office, he was trying to, sell off, get Boris Johnson and Theresa May to sell off parts of the NHS to private insurance companies based in the States. That means we'd have been paying potential health insurance like they do in America. There was a risk as well that we might get chlorinated chicken as part of a free trade deal. So we need to be careful. He's only after the benefits of his own MAGA base. He doesn't care about the people of Britain and Europe, in my opinion. He's only after himself. So that's where I don't think we're getting it.
The woman in the green jacket, yeah.
Donald Trump only believes in himself and nobody else. He doesn't want anything to do with NATO. He'll try and crush NATO. That's what he said the last time.
All right. Just at the very back there, the man in the red T-shirt, yeah.
I think everybody's struggling with this question because the answer is not many. It does not bring many benefits at all. I think the only thing we can take from this is that we can possibly stop relying so much on America, and we can possibly, start producing homegrown products and seek out other ventures instead of America.
OK, man here in the front. Yeah.
The trouble with Donald Trump is he's very volatile and you don't know what he's going to do next. He can get up on a morning and say one thing and by lunchtime totally changes his mind. Now, he's on about these tariffs, and I think he will impose high tariffs, and we're going to suffer as much as anybody else, even though we are a special friend to him, so he says, and I don't honestly believe that he has special friends, because he can't even look after his own. He gets rid of somebody who goes against him every time. And to me, you've got to tread very, very carefully with this man, because he could cause a lot of problems. I mean, he's even on about now clearing a war up in 24 hours.
What, in Ukraine?
I mean, how on earth can anybody do that when, wars last for years? And it just frightens me to death. It really does.
Tim? He doesn't frighten you to death, does he?
No, I tell you what frightens me over the last few years, and I say this respectfully to Joe Biden because I think he was a good man, but unfortunately what the world saw in the now outgoing President of the United States was a weak, declining man, a man declining before our eyes. And if you are Putin in Moscow, or you were the Taliban in Afghanistan, or frankly the proxies of Iran who are terrorising the Middle East, you didn't see an America that worried you at all. You thought you could get away literally with murder. Now, what the gentleman there just said is partly right, I think. With Donald Trump, you do not quite know how he's going to react to anything. But what he is, whether we like it or not, he's a strong man. And my hope, and this is the big hope, I think, for Britain, is, and for the world, if you have a strong man in the United States who invested a lot in the military last time, I honestly believe the world will be safer. Now, it may be not the conventional route, but I think with Biden in the White House, we have seen the world get much, much more dangerous. And I think who would have feared Kamala Harris if she'd been elected? I don't think she would have frightened anyone at all. Trump will change people's view of the calculator. You take on America with Trump in the White House at your peril, and we'll all benefit from the safer world that will ensue.
So, on Ukraine then, for example, since you mentioned Ukraine and Donald Trump says, I can sort that out within 24 hours. I mean, you're giving him the benefit of hyperbole there. Many, not least President Zelensky, fear what Donald Trump will mean for Ukraine. We've got European leaders in Budapest today talking about exactly that. Does that give you pause in your support for Trump?
Look, what is happening in Ukraine at the moment is the most important issue we should be worried about on our continent. There was a BBC reporter, I forget who immediately, Fiona, but told the story about a mother who had seen her son murdered that morning, and Russian soldiers were celebrating outside her home about the death of her own son. But what is happening in Ukraine at the moment? So, I bow to no one. Putin is evil. Evil, evil, evil. Unqualified. But what we're seeing at the moment in Ukraine is a World War I situation. It's trench warfare. Thousands of Ukrainian and Russian people are losing their lives. They're being maimed, they're being injured. We have to find a way of ending this war. Now, my hope is, and I don't know exactly what he means by that 24-hour promise, but my hope is that he will say to Putin, we have to have some sort of arrangement. Putin has lost lots of people. He hasn't got Ukraine. He's been humiliated.
But surely, Tim, what people fear is that any agreement that Putin would settle for would have to include retaining some Ukrainian
I'm afraid
land.
it would do, because I don't see any other alternative. You can say, OK, we're not going to accept any loss of Ukrainian territory at all, and in which case the war will go on. I don't like the fact we have to do a deal literally with the devil, in my view. I regard Putin as the devil. But I think some sort of deal has to be done to him. Otherwise, we're going to see our continent with more blood flowing over it for years to come. I hope what Trump says in return is, in turn for the deal, we'll make the rest of Ukraine a member of NATO. If the rest of Ukraine was attacked, then there would be, the whole of NATO would be on Ukraine's side. But I'm afraid, as much as I hate the whole idea, a deal does have to be done some way.
Woman in the... Sorry, what was that? I couldn't...
It didn't work in the Second World War. It won't work now.
You said you're talking appeasement.
And I can understand that, and I've made it incredibly clear that I do not like the prospect of giving Putin anything, but he has lost a huge amount of his armed forces. The Russian people are losing lives. He hasn't got what he wanted, but he is a nuclear-powered, a nuclear-armed power.
But you're willing to let him have land that doesn't belong to Russia.
And the alternative is what? Carrying on fighting for years and years to come with more young Ukrainians and Russians dying?
The alternative is enslavement.
I don't think it is enslavement. I'm afraid it's realpolitik.
It will form another USSR.
And if you carry on like this, you are condemning another generation to death, to injury, for no gain at all in territory. I don't like the possibility of a deal as much as you do, sir, but I think something has to be done.
Yes, I will. Yes, man here.
I think we have to take some acceptance of it's happened, OK? We have to accept that he's a shrewd, aggressive, but selfish business person. There is money on the table in the White House, and there's also tariffs to be handed out. What we need is pragmatic, creative, quick people from our current government to be out there doing deals now. Yep. I'm not convinced that we have those pragmatic people right now that can match that guy face to face.
And it's the woman there with the blonde hair. No, further that way. Yes.
Is the world gone nuts? Trump is a criminal. I mean, is that the best America's got, Biden and Trump, out of all their millions? It's said that he's going to make it a detective's... It's going to be an estate because he is going to try and make it so no one else gets re-elected and he'll be there till he dies. I read that the other day. If that's true, how's that good for your voting? I hope that don't happen.
Yeah, I think it's unlikely. I think I'll stick my neck on that. I think that's unlikely. But certainly he has talked about how he wants to be a dictator. Others said, obviously, he was saying that in jest. I'm not in a position to say. Bonnie.
I wanted to go back to the original question about, Trump. And benefits. And benefits to this young man who is the future. I was certainly not. I'm a former New Yorker, and I lived in New York in the 80s when Trump was coming up. He's a totally amoral, transactional businessman. What he's done, and in the American people electing him, he's torn up the post-World War II concordat that we have had since 1945 about how the world is supposed to work. Now, maybe that should happen, maybe it shouldn't, but that's what's happened. And what the United Kingdom is going to have to do, the United Kingdom is going to have to go to Mar-a-Lago, either literally or figuratively, and you're going to have to put your wares on the table, and you're going to have to tell him what you can do for him. Now, if you can do something for this man, and I mean, when I mean him, the electorate, if you can do something for the United States, you're in. If you can't, you won't. He has no concept of the special relationship. It doesn't mean anything to him. And I'm saying that not because politically it doesn't mean anything to him. He doesn't see what has the United Kingdom given the United States? Monetarily. Nada in comparison, okay? And what the Labour government is going to have to do is be savvy enough to understand that the underlying question with Donald Trump is, what can you do for me? Now, if you can do something for me, if you can give me some bases, if you can be the stooge over here that holds up the other side of this part of the world so I can do my thing over there, if you pull out of NATO, if you threaten to pull, whatever I need you to do, that's what then we'll have a quid pro quo. That's it. That's the end of it. We got nothing to give him.
Can I just briefly comment? Because I largely agree with what Bonnie said. I think he is a pretty amoral businessman in how he calculates. But actually, I do think we are quite fortunate in a way. He does have an affection for Britain that's different from most countries. I don't know if you remember how he revered the Queen. He doesn't treat many people well.
Tim, stop. This is the corny American BS that a lot of Americans have that bring them over here looking for the castles and the Queen and all of this stuff. It's got nothing to do with the reality of your life as a British person. You can take that to the bank.
I think that's wrong, because if you actually look, he invested in Britain with golf courses. He said his mother was from Scotland. He generally, he's not as indifferent to Britain as you think.
I didn't say he was indifferent. No. Okay, I said you are part of the Disneyland idea of that country.
Hang on one second. So look, we've talked about Donald Trump on this programme before, and it's been quite clear to me, and surveys make it clear as well, that the vast majority of people in this country do not support Trump. But there are people that do. And given that he's just been elected, I just want to see if I can hear... Stephen, you obviously do, and you asked a question. Are there other people here that support... Well, that think Donald Trump can do good things? Yes. OK, let's hear from you here. And anyone else, incidentally, who's got you.
I just think, like, when you look at the wars and stuff like that, we've got these world wars going on now. Before, in the last Trump term, we didn't have this. And although Putin is not someone to be trusted, you've got someone who can actually talk to Putin and other like-minded people to him and deter them. And it was like Tim said, it's because you don't know what he's going to do. That's why they won't do that. But, I mean, if you look at our government now, you've got Keir Starmer, and is someone really going to be scared of what Keir Starmer's going to do? They're not.
OK. Anyone else who who thinks that the election result in America is a good thing. Yes, you at the very back. You think that, do you? Right, let's get a microphone to you.
I don't specifically think that it's a good thing, but I think that Trump in office would perhaps make the road a little bit safer because, like the gentleman said there, about his unpredictability. If you don't know what the man's going to do, you'd be very careful before you actually poke the bear. Again, when it comes to the UK dealing with him, I don't think we've got off to a great start with some of Mr Lammy's comments that he made about Trump before coming into office.
Right. I mean, Sarah, let me just ask you about that. I mean, there's any number of fruity quotes I could use that David... I mean, Keir Starmer's not been complimentary about Donald Trump either, but, you know, tyrant in a toupee is one that's particularly stuck in my mind by David Lammy. How are you going to get past that?
Well, I think, you know, you can look at politicians across the board and find them criticising Donald Trump. Lots of conservative
David Lammy, in fairness, has used...
well.
I mean, he's called him a KKK sympathiser, a Nazi, all sorts.
I think he's also, Donald Trump, been criticised by his new vice president. Yeah. He's been criticised by Elon Musk. I mean, he's, you know, I think if that was the criteria, then, you know, he wouldn't be having relationships with the people he's got around him. Look, David Lammy met with him for dinner a few weeks ago. They got on well. They've been building relationships. We knew that this was a possibility, so we have been planning for it. And to the point about, you know, the wider point about how we're going to position ourselves, look, we will always stand up for our values. We will always stand up for what's right for Britain, right? Because that's important. But we want to do that in partnership with the Americans. We don't want to be in a position where the only way to win peace across the world is for everybody to be frightened of everybody else. That isn't necessarily the answer.
Let's just talk about peace, because we've had two people now saying, at least two people saying, his unpredictability could be the thing that actually brings peace, because people don't know how he's going to react, or he's a strong man, depending on how you want to put it. I mean, David Lammy called Donald Trump a threat to world order, which is clearly the reverse of what these people are saying.
Well, yeah, and as I said, there's been, you know, you could probably read out 2 pages of things that various people have said. We have to deal with the reality,
in terms of
which
likelihood
is that he has been elected
hang on, the point I'm making, I get that, and you said that, but
yeah.
In terms of whether he is more or less likely to bring peace to the global conflicts we say, namely Ukraine and in the Middle East, and given what David Lammy has said about him being a threat to the world order, do you think, as a representative of the government here, that Donald Trump is more or less likely to bring peace to those two situations?
Well, we don't know, because he hasn't become the president yet. He hasn't implemented
Well, from what
policies.
You've seen and from what he's said, he's run a long campaign.
There's been a lot of heat in the election campaign, as there was in our election campaign. We will see, but we will make it our business. My view is the British government will make it our business to stand up for what's right for Britain, to stand up for what we think is right in the world, to play our part, to try and have a good relationship with the Americans. We have huge amounts of trade, as I said, as the Minister for Industry. I've met multiple American businesses that are operating here.
You've made those points.
Thousands of jobs. We can do this.
You've said that. But in terms of whether he's more or less likely to bring peace, and all the things he said on the campaign trail about those things, the jury's out as far as you're concerned.
We'll have to see what happens, but we need to play our part influencing, just as other countries will do, and the closer relationship that we're building with our EU partners will mean we also can help in that space.
All right, let me take a point from that man there,
I think if you look at the people surrounding Donald Trump, you can see the most disgusting, racist, homophobic people. I don't think you need to look at Trump himself. I think you need to look at who he's surrounded by, and I think it's so obvious that he's going to bring nothing but destruction to the world. I can't see him doing any good for the world whatsoever.
And you say that, and yet he increased his vote share amongst black people, amongst Hispanics, amongst other people of colour.
Yeah. I don't understand that, personally.
Okay. I do.
I'll come to you then, Bonnie. Let me just hear, yes.
You see, the thing is, we're underestimating Donald Trump, because when you think about it, he had 4 years of presidency before the other one, and he's been shot, he's been criminal, you know, with
he's a criminal. He's a convicted criminal.
And he's still got voted by his own country with the biggest majority.
Okay.
And, you know, and to me, you know, you can't underestimate the guy.
All right. The woman next to you.
Yeah. In my view, he's, I believe, a 64-count felon. He's committed numerous crimes. He should never have been allowed to run for presidency in the first place. He has broke some constitutional laws. He is a criminal in so many ways. The only benefit I could possibly see from Trump becoming president is, as people have said, benefits towards war procedures, benefits towards negotiations, and even that is not a guarantee because of how unpredictable he is. He is openly admitted and supported his supporters going out and causing a race war. He has created legislation against women's bodies. He is controlling. He should not be a man allowed in power.
I mean, pretty much everything that you're saying is true, and yet he won. And not only did he win, he won the popular vote, and he increased his vote amongst black people, amongst Hispanics. You're more likely than any of us to have an insight into that.
Black people are people. You know, the thing is, I would tell you a little secret about my fellow Americans. We're squeamish. The second thing about us, we don't go very far. You can find people in America, they ain't gone nowhere. And not only have they not gone anywhere, they don't want to go nowhere. We live, America is a continent between two walls, ocean walls. And a lot of American feeling and sensibility is about being protected, about being enclosed, about being safe, and about the only person who can help you is a man with a 6-gun. Okay? Now, this is all, I'm saying it very crudely, and I'm saying it very basically. Of course, it's much more complicated than that. But what Donald Trump appealed to in this election were those tropes. I was surprised that, you know, so many people bought into it. And, you know, Latino people and black people are no different. We're all Americans. But most Americans see America as a fortress, as a place of shelter, as a place of escape. And think about it, this is my last point. America was settled by people who escaped, okay? People who left to do their own thing and build their own life. And it was about rolling up the carpet, using the ocean wall to block it all off. And that is at the heart of the American experience. The brilliance of Donald Trump, besides being somebody that I always felt the American president was going to come off television and probably a television game show, and I'm not kidding. I always knew that. He's done that. And he understands that people in America want to be safe. They want to be safe from you. And if that's possible, you get to lead the country. And that's it.
Okay, listen, I'm going to move on. I suspect we will talk a lot about Donald Trump in the coming years. So I'm going to actually just leave it there for now. I just want to say where we are next week in case you would like to come and be part of the audience, as our lovely audience is here. So next week we are in Basingstoke in Hampshire, and the week after that we're in Trowbridge in Wiltshire. So if you live near Basingstoke or Trowbridge and you'd like to come take part in the programme, I mean, why wouldn't you? It's good, isn't it? Absolutely. So go to the Question Hour website, apply. There wasn't much else you could say there, I suppose. Apply. Here's the instructions, and we would love to see you. Right, OK, let's take another question now from Alexander.
How can Labour say that they are investing in the future while also increasing tuition fees for university students?
Are you a student, Alexander? Sorry, are you a student, Alexander?
I am.
So let's hear what you think.
I am a third year, so it's not really going to affect me. But I've been speaking to first years and my younger sister who wants to be a student. And, you know, we feel betrayed for voting Labour. Labour always seems to be like economy. This government is always, oh, we're going to increase the economy, make it grow. But having a more educated workforce, you know, helps the economy grow. So it just seems, you know, backward.
OK. Matt?
Well, I think lots. Do you know what? I don't think students are the only people losing out, are they? The budget had lots of consequences. The one that
we're talking about tuition fees specifically. Let's stick to that.
OK. Well, we've seen lots of movement on, and actually, this generation of students, the people who went to school during COVID, have had the toughest of times. Come out with all of the challenges that being educated during that time have brought forward. You have to Well, you have to look at what's going into universities, how you make sure that the right investment's there to make sure our universities are competing with the world. I think it is a bit tough, and I don't think that anybody who voted Labour in this election expected to see that come within months of them voting, particularly the students.
I mean, the tuition fees haven't been raised since 2017, when, of course, it was the
Conservatives. It was quite a sizable
since when the Conservatives raised them. Should the Conservatives have got into government this time round, would the Conservatives not have raised them as well?
I don't foresee that we would have raised them. I think there was an effort there. I don't think that we would have.
Universities going
we actually
bust left, right and
centre. There were significant changes around what a loan was, wasn't there, in recent times, in that your loan was paid back later, you paid it back at a low rate, you were earning more before you paid it back. So sometimes the headline cost is huge, but actually you've got to look at what it means, how many people will end up going back to pay it down, when do they start paying it, how much are they earning before they pay it back. But I still think the people who voted for them did not believe it. But then again, people who voted for them didn't believe they were going to lose the winter fuel allowance. They didn't believe that taxes were going to go up. There's a lot of people who are very unhappy, not least the farmers. I'm sure we'll get on to it.
Sarah. I mean, there are. I mean, we talked about David Lammy and quotes. There are quotes galore from the Deputy Leader Angela Rayner talking about debt deterring poorer students from going to university. The level of debt for people leaving university is completely unsustainable, and you have just increased that level of debt.
Yeah. Well, look, we made a decision based on the fact that our universities have been in financial crisis for quite some time now. They were really struggling. They haven't had investment for years. And we made a decision that the fees are going to go up by £285 a year. Now, you're not going to be paying more as you go. You're going to be paying off the same amount each month. You'll just be paying it off over a longer period. So did we want to do that? No. Did we want to make some of the decisions in the budget that we wanted to make? No.
And do you agree with Angela Rayner that debt is deterring students from attending university? Well, and therefore this move is part of
what we've said, and what Bridget Phillipson, who's the Secretary of State, has said, is that we're going to have major reform of our university sector that she's going to announce next year. So there's going to be reform, and we'll see what happens in terms of maintenance grants and things like that. And of course, maintenance grants have gone up as well, which is really important. Further education is really important too, and there was hundreds of millions of pounds of extra funding for further education in the budget. A lot of the jobs that we're going to need in the future, if we're going to grow the economy in the way that we see, whether we need engineers, we need construction workers, we need all kinds of people doing all kinds of jobs, we're going to have to make sure our further education colleges are properly funded, because they've been completely hollowed out over the last years of Conservative government. So, you know, we've made difficult choices, but I would say, and this is really important on the budget is not the end of our ambition. There are some difficult choices there. We had to deal with the problems that we found, the £22 billion black hole, but there are lots more policies. We're setting up Skills England, which will give us a map of the skills
but
that we need
just sticking with tuition fees just for a minute.
Industrial strategy so that people can have
just sticking with tuition, because we could, otherwise we could go into a whole list of things, but I totally hear that you're saying it was a difficult choice, one necessarily you didn't want to make, but it was a choice that you had to make. Do you equally accept that the corollary of that decision is what the Deputy Leader predicted all that time ago, which is that it will deter students from disadvantaged backgrounds going to university, and that it is unsustainable for many? Look, do you agree that that is still the case?
I agree that we need to encourage people from all backgrounds to go to university.
That's not what I'm asking.
The reform that we will bring in next year...
I'm asking, do you agree with what Angela Rayner said?
We'll make sure we have the right package.
And do you?
I think when we have the reforms, when you see the reforms that we make, there'll be a change there that will encourage people and enable people to go into university. But the decisions that we took, for example, to protect those lowest paid in our budget from the cost of living crisis that we've just seen, we had to make choices to protect those people.
But not the pension.
On the minimum wage, for example, so 3 million people will have a pay rise.
Let's stick with tuition,
But of course we want people to go to university and apprenticeships and further education.
Yes.
17 years old. I applied to university 4 weeks ago.
Oh.
People my age in my school are discouraged from going to university after your announcement. There are no other opportunities for us, because degree apprenticeships have us moving to places like London and Manchester, and they are so incredibly competitive, where we can't have other options apart from university. And the amount of debt that is being portrayed in the media at the moment is discouraging to us.
Yeah. Okay. Man at the very back. Yes. You've got the microphone there, yes.
2 points. Firstly, the increase in tuition fees is probably just about enough to help universities cope with the increase in national insurance costs they have to face from last week. And secondly, a big disincentive for the poorest students is the failure to index the maintenance loan. That's a much bigger question for many in terms of affordability and ability to study.
Right, so it's gone up, but not gone up enough. That's what you're saying.
That's why we need reform
okay.
of the package overall.
Yes, woman here in the glasses.
Have you considered the possible impact that you're going to force talent overseas by raising tuition fees? And you clearly are not answering the questions here. Well, I'm just hearing like a rhetoric coming out. But I have 5 children. I've got 1 in Cambridge, 1 in, a middle-of-the-road university, and I'm also a special guardian to my 2 grandchildren. So I'm going to be dealing with children who possibly want to go to university, all being well. Yeah. Where are we going to be at that stage if you're raising them now, that this is going to continue?
Yeah. That's right. Well, I mean, I would say I hear what you're saying. I've got kids myself in secondary school thinking about what they're going to do. We've put a big investment in this budget into our schools because we have to start there. Our schools are crumbling.
She's asking specifically about university and tuition fees.
And we need to review how the tuition system works. And that's what I'm saying to you is what we're doing. The fees have gone up this year. They have. Maintenance has gone up too. And we will reform the system and we will bring that forward and we will make those changes. But we made some difficult choices for sure. But as you know, as has been said, universities are really struggling for funding and we can't have them falling over. They've got to have the money that they need to educate children. So there's loads of things we need to do to encourage our kids to go to university, to go to FA.
Yeah, I would like to come back with respect. So can you answer my question? What are you going to do when we start losing talent from this country to other countries because you're outpricing people to take those steps into further education and possibly to university? I'll just give you a statistic while I'm speaking. 140,000 children live in kinship care. Probably 90% of those children, the carers who've stepped up to stop those children going into the care system have had to give up their jobs. So are you telling me that those 140,000 children don't matter? Because a lot of those 140,000 children, their families can't afford to maintain them further than they are already. So what are we doing for that? What are we doing? We've got the people who can afford it, and Labour's always talking, you've put a tax on private education, but what are you doing for, because in my view, every child matters. So you're going to lose talent.
Okay, all right, let's answer quickly.
I think there's lots of issues there. There's the issue of kinship carers and, the campaigns around kinship carers are really powerful and we need to look at that, right? Because you don't get ridiculously, you don't get the advantages that people who adopt get, and I think there is a problem there that we need to solve. In terms of people going abroad, I think it costs quite a lot to go abroad to other universities. What we tend to have is people coming to this country to go to our universities because they're really well respected and well regarded, and other European countries often the kids there want to come to our universities. But do we want people to be able to reach their aspiration? Yeah, that is exactly what the Labour Party is for. It's what we're about. We want people to be able to reach their dreams and get into university, get into an apprentice, get into FE and get a good job. And that, over the life of the Parliament, that is what we are here to do.
Can I speak to the young man, where is he anyway, who asked the question initially? What was amazing to me about this country when I came here 40 years ago was that people didn't have to pay to go to university. And there's a generation. There's a generation of people who didn't have to do that. Yeah. Now, I had to pay to go to university. I had to start working at 19 years old. And I'm telling you, when you have to, and you know this because you have to do that, you develop a relationship with money that's about debt, that's about trying to make ends meet, that's about stopping your education so you can earn enough money to pay your fees. It's about living from pillar to post. It's about trying to figure out how you're going to be able to buy your books, how are you going to be able to eat, how are you going to pay your tuition fees, and you do all kinds of maybe sometimes nefarious things to be able to go to school to get your degree. I'm not a politician, but I would expect a Labour government, because I support Labour, what I would expect a Labour government to say very simply to me, equal education for all, and we want everyone to have a higher education. Now, how we do that, I'm not sure, But that's what we want to do, and the rest of it flows from there.
Tim.
Well, look, I support the general principle of tuition fees because if we went back to that era when everyone got free university education, we wouldn't have, since then, 3 or 4 times as many people are able to go to university. Now, if that was all paid for by the state, that would be less money for levelling up in Hartlepool, it would be less money for vocational education. You have to make a choice if you're a taxpayer, if you're a government, as what you spend your money on. But what I would say to you and everyone else who is facing the whole prospect of going to university and paying these tuition fees is, we have let you down in that we don't hold universities to proper account at the moment. We absolutely have some of the best universities in the world, but particularly since COVID, a lot of kids are going to university, they're not getting tuition properly, they're not getting the face-to-face tuition that Bonnie and I probably got at university. They're taking place in lectures with hundreds of kids, a lot of it is distance learning. They're not getting a quality of education. A lot of people are getting degrees that aren't setting them up for life. And universities, yeah, they're wonderful institutions, but you know, they're also businesses. And we need to hold them to much higher account than we've done for them. And you know what? I wouldn't mind if some universities closed because they're not providing a good education. So, yeah, I think the government took a brave decision and the right decision, although it was a broken promise, another one, but they took the right decision on... It was the right decision to raise tuition fees, but my goodness, let's get more in return from our universities, because at the moment we're not getting that return. Okay.
Let me take a couple more points before I move on. Yes, the man there in the blue top.
I'd like to also discuss also the rise in the bus fare caps.
All right, well, we're sort of on tuition fees at the moment.
Yes, but this would affect adult uni students, especially working class uni students who want to change around in their lives, want to get bigger prospects, especially those who can't afford accommodation closer to the university.
So they have to get the bus in?
Yes, and that's going to be a 50% increase here.
So it's gone from £2 to £3?
Yeah, so they spend £40 a week, 5 days a week, they come into university. That's going to, say, £60 maybe, I think so. Anyway, that's going to be... They could have spent that on food, supporting the families. They're not going to have that money.
OK, well, look, that brings us to another question. So I'm going to hear that question and we'll answer that within it, if that's right. So, Ben Forbes, whereabouts are you sitting? Oh, yeah.
After a budget with tax rises for many, when are we going to start to feel that things will get better?
So, do you mind if I ask you, Ben, how you voted at the last election?
I voted Labour.
And I'm getting the sense from the way you've asked that question and the tone in which you asked it that you're not feeling that good about that.
I mean, it's not a budget I wanted. Yes, you said you weren't going to put up income tax, VAT, NI tax and stuff, but in a way where you've put that tax on companies paying more in national insurance, it will inevitably fall on us, one way or another, as consumers. I accept we have had 14 years of sheer incompetence, which needs to be fixed. But, you know, surely better decisions could have been made, because, quite frankly, you've screwed a lot of people over, pensioners, farmers. Many Labour voters will go against you.
You feel screwed over about your bus fare?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and you know, it's all right saying that, you know, make an unpopular decision now. Many governments, when they've come into government, make an unpopular budget. All governments have done it. But when are we going to feel that, you know, the benefits? Because what we don't want is another return to austerity. We don't want that.
So many things I want to say. The first thing is there will be no return to austerity. That is not the plan in the budget, and that is not the long-term plan. The second thing I want to say is I came in as a minister in the Department of Business and Trade. It's where the money for the Horizon scandal was supposed to be. Wasn't there. It's where the money for the Advanced Manufacturing Fund, £4.5 billion, important to this region, really good manufacturing, important part of the funding. There was no money for that. The scale of the problem was significant. And then I'd say a few things in the sense of when you should get improvement and when you should see a return. First, people on the lowest income will get a benefit now, because we have increased the living wage to a point where 3 million people will get a pay rise that will be significant and will make a difference to their lives. The second thing I'll say
hang on, Sarah, just because your point is that with the rise in employers' national insurance, even if they do get an increase with the minimum wage, which, as you rightly say, you have increased, further down the line, and the Office of Budget Responsibility says, 76% of the cost of that is going to get passed on to employees.
That's why I get to the other points I was going to make, which is there are some systemic problems with the way this country works that we are trying to fix that will make us better off in the long run. One of them is our energy costs were sky high when we had the war in Ukraine and the problems that came from that. If we are creating our own energy here in the UK, and there's a role in this region for that, a very big role, that we will have cheaper energy and we will be more secure. So there are some systemic things we absolutely have to tackle. The third thing I'll say is everybody in this audience, if they get sick, should be able to go to a hospital. This is really important that we invest in our public services. So we made a decision in the budget to invest a lot of money into the health service and into our schools, because that is really important and will make a difference in the long run. We have millions of people off work because they're sick. If we fix that, there will be more money in people's pockets. And the final point I'll make, which is why it is our job now to beat those OBR forecasts. So through things like changes to our skills landscape, through things like the industrial strategy, through getting business to invest in the UK, we have a whole raft of policies, the measures of which are not in the OBR, because the OBR doesn't measure it.
What do you say? So specifically, hang on a second, specifically to Ben's point, though, if you've got employers such as today Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer's, BT, what have you, saying they're just going to have to put prices up, you've got other employers saying, well, we're going to have to just either have fewer staff. I had some on the programme last week. Fewer staff, maybe employ people abroad. And you've got the Bank of England saying inflation is going to come down more slowly than it might otherwise have done. When is Ben going to not feel the disadvantages of that, but actually feel he's got more money in his pocket?
Well, the OBR forecast showed that by the end of the Parliament, there'll be growth and people will be getting better off. We want to beat that. We are introducing policies that will do that. If people are not so sick, if people are managing to go out to work, if people have got a better security net, so employment rights, all of those issues, you will be better off, the country will be better off. But I understand where you're coming from, right? I completely hear what you're saying. As someone who voted Labour, it's my job to persuade you by the end of this Parliament that you are better off, you'll see it in your pocket.
He's got to feel that he's better off, not persuade him.
But the OBR forecast actually, as a result of the budget, drew it down. It said that growth was going to be lower. It said that inflation was going to be higher than it was before the budget.
But Matt, you oversaw the lowest living standards, the biggest drop that we'd seen.
We can go on about history, but actually...
It's not history. We have to deal with
very recent history, in fairness.
I'll make 2 points, didn't get in the last.
All right, but the OBR forecast was that growth would actually be slightly lower than if you hadn't done the budget.
And inflation would be higher.
Anyway,
I didn't get in on I wanted to have a quick comment on the young people, because whatever you're thinking, make sure you go to university. My dad would have slammed me if I was going to university and trying to get pay for it and getting and running up debts. But do it. But actually, one of the things that I think is really good for young people around here is that now you don't have to go to university at the other end of the country. In Teesside, in the last few years, since I grew up, if you wanted a job in the civil service, you'd have had to go down to London. You can now get it in Darlington, and there are apprentices going in there. If you want to work in the greenest, cleanest, new energy stuff that's coming down the line, there are 20,000 jobs going on at the Freeport. Great stuff. And then we're about to see this new film production place open in Hartlepool. £16 billion of government.
Should we deal with the question?
Lots of opportunities. I think it's really positive. But around the money...
Ben, let's deal with the question. And Ben is saying that tax rises for many. The point that many economic analysts are saying is, OK, Labour have done this, but the Conservatives, if they had got into power again, they would have had to do something.
So I was on the BBC this morning, the local radio station at the BBC, and as I got to the end of answering the questions, the producer ran and she said, but, if the other side were here, they would have said about the £22 billion black hole. If you've got a black hole and you're trying to balance the books, then you reduce spending. The things that we've seen on spending, that we've seen the reductions in, whether it be clawing that money away from pensioners, whether it be taxing on NICs, they're actually spending £70 billion more. So there are choices. Everything has to be prioritised. There are things you can spend on.
Can I just say something as a non-politician? To all of you young people, go to university because it expands your mind. You become a human being. A university is not a business. It runs like a business, but it ain't a business. It is a center for expanding your humanity. And to me, a Labour government should know that. First, that is what's important to me, is to give people a chance to become bigger and better human beings. Because one more thing, Fiona.
Okay, I was going to say, we actually have to answer the question here.
Your generation is going to be up against AI, and you're going to have to know in your gut what a human being is and what a machine is.
Let's deal with the question. So what I'm wondering is, you've got Ben here saying, you know, when's he going to feel better? And I'm just wondering if there are any lessons we can draw, just coming back full circle from what we've just seen in the States, where the American economy is doing really well. And yet people...
Say that again, Fiona?
Well, I'm just coming back to the American election.
Sure.
The American economy is actually doing very well. But nonetheless, it's clear from the result, and what a lot of people have said, that they just didn't feel in their pockets that they were doing well. And I'm just wondering, given what Ben has said here, you know, you voted Labour, you're now thinking it's not quite what I was expecting. Are there any lessons for Labour here in terms of people feeling better off or not better off?
Labour needs to talk straight. Now, I'm not saying they're not, but they need to make their conversation with you and me as voters straight. The second thing that needs to happen is, and I'm saying this as a naturalized British citizen, and you may all know this naturally, what I don't get, every new government every new party comes in the government, they open the cabinet, they go, oh my God, I didn't know this was in here. Why don't you know? And why can't you put that in?
Because it was hidden.
No, I'm not saying you didn't. I'm not saying you didn't. But we need to have a manifesto that tells us what it is exactly and what they are going to do. I'm not saying Labour didn't do that. I'm not. But we need to be more plain-spoken about it, because one thing I learned in this election, which was a tragedy for me, is that people, after the COVID pandemic, which was the plague, people are still cocooned in their spaces, and they want to get out and breathe, and that's what it's about.
Woman with the glasses.
I think we have had some straight talking, because if you listen, it's by the end of this 4 years, things will begin to change, and it's going to take a generation for some of the public service investment to trickle through. Hartlepool has got one of the lowest rates of people going to university. And so we have to raise the aspiration, but we also have to have what's coming next year, the plans for apprentices, for better further education. Not everyone, that is not the route everyone's going to take, and we need to broaden our vision for the future in the North East. And it's going to take a while. We can't expect in 4 months for us to feel better.
Okay. Man here in the front with a black shirt on, yes.
The employer's national insurance increase is going to get passed on to all of us via our council tax, because surely the councils, as an employer, will want to pass that burden on, so they've got the same revenue coming in. So we're all going to pick up that extra tax. No.
I just check, as a public sector employer, are councils exempt from that?
I'm not entirely
sure. Okay.
Sure. The NHS is, but I don't think
the NHS is.
Yeah, I think they
primary care isn't GPs.
No,
dentists,
no, that's true. Tim.
Look, I think one thing that Labour was absolutely right about in the general election was talk about the fact that Britain, like many European countries, have become low-growth economies, and something needs to change, because, you know, everything we've been talking about, universities, whatever, if we don't have a growing economy, then we're in trouble. And my concern with the budget last week, you know, how long are we going to have to wait until we see some dividends, is the cart's been put before the horse. The tax burden has gone up, which will be difficult for lots of small businesses, as I think the gentleman there was suggesting. But it's not the only measure that the government has taken that I think could really flatten growth. Now, all the individual measures are defensible, I get that, but the measures to give employees more rights will probably make it less likely that some people will be taken on. The extra national insurance, the green burdens, the new controls on landlords. You all understand why you want these regulations and taxes, but the danger is this with government is Well, we have the highest energy costs
Yes,
in
that's not green.
in Europe. And
the solution is that we grow our own energy here, as it were. We have green energy in the UK.
But the estimate is that the costs of Ed Miliband's policies, I think Ed Miliband is probably the most dangerous member of this government, the costs of his policies will impose extra money on business.
The report that came out this week from the independent NISO, the body that's looking at what's possible, what's not possible, said that we can reach our target by 2030 and that will mean cheaper energy.
And then there's plenty of other forecasts that say actually the costs will be much higher. And one of the reasons why we do pay the highest energy in Europe is because already the cost of the green energies that we're pursuing.
It's not. It's because we're reliant on the oil.
I'm not sure we're going to...
Oil and gas licences and import all of our oil and gas from elsewhere in the globe.
Doesn't make any sense.
Let me hear a little bit from the audience. Yes, there's a couple of men back there. Yeah, let's hear from you.
The first point is, do you honestly think the farmers are going to be better off under this budget? And the second point is that there's a lot of money going into, there's £1 billion set aside for SEND in education. We're recruiting 6,000 new teachers. But something I'd like to point out from a public sector perspective, we're looking at training, but we're not looking at retainment. We are not doing enough to retain the experience of the public sector staff that we have, because that's how our public sectors work. And we've got to look at how we retain the staff.
All right, the man next to you. Yes.
Just one point on the Labour Party. How can anyone trust the Labour Party again when they've gone back on everything that they said in their promises and their lead up to the election?
Have you got any particular promises in mind when you say that? Do you have any particular promises in mind when you say that?
Yes, the pensions. The first thing the Labour Party did when it got into power was cut the money from pensioners. And all that
You're talking
does
about the winter fuel allowance?
All that is doing is encouraging people not to work. People like me who have worked for 50 years to pay for a pension are now being penalised because we went to work. Had I been not a worker and satisfied to sit at home and watch television or go to the club on a weekend, I would have been getting my electricity or help with my electricity bills this winter. At this moment in time, I am not.
Okay. Listen, sir, we've got about 30 seconds left. I mean,
30 seconds.
I know. Listen, you can't answer. But just generally, how do you feel the budget has gone down? Because I've had a lot of discontent, not only today, but also last week.
So I think it was a difficult budget. Of course it was. We made choices and there are implications of those choices. But we made promises in the manifesto to protect working people, to invest in public services and to put in place the infrastructure that will grow our economy and create jobs. And that is what that budget has delivered. And the point the gentleman makes about public service workers is exactly right. And that's why we have managed to come to agreements in lots of the public sector strikes that were happening to make sure people are getting a decent pay. And the argument that people, Tim or others might make that, we're in the pocket of the unions and we're giving people, we're giving hard-working people a pay rise, and that's the right thing to do.
That's not his question.
Listen,
How have you protected working people?
I'm so sorry. Forgive me, but we're actually over our allotted time, so I'm going to have to end the programme. But I hear your points. You've made them very powerfully. I noted that you asked about farmers. I wondered if we might talk about that tonight. In fact, I think we may have got one question on that, but I'm sure that will come up at some point. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you very much to all of you. I'm sorry to cut you short, sir. And thank you to you at home for watching. Remember, we're in Basingstoke next week from Question Time here in Hartlepool. Bye-bye.